1 minute flyby on what your experience was?
All right, when I started soaring, I saw a little article in AMA magazine about these guys in Desert Storm flying helicopters, but they're wearing their infrared things, and they could go see the thermals coming off the desert. They could throttle back and still go up. So anyway, at the end of this one paragraph, it says contact the SSA if you want to learn how to fly. I wrote them a letter. I'm a complete beginner. Where do I start? They sent me a big package of stuff and me da-da-da-da. Anyway, in the magazine they sent me was an ad for Soar Minden. Soar Minden was selling block time, pay up front, you pay half. So I bought $6,000 worth of time for $3,000. And I flew and flew and flew. I got my license in half a year or so. Commuting up and back from here. Anyway, I flew mainly Grove 103s. That was all my training. And when I got my license, I flew Grove 102s. I flew TG 300, 2 different Discus. And I don't know, bunch of Grove 103s. They must have had 4 of them while I was there. Anyway,
Okay.
they're all different characteristics. Some of the spoilers you could let go, some the spoiler would throw at you. They're all different. Anyway, had a blast up there.
Okay, and Rich, how did you get into it? What did you fly?
I was working in Hayward, and the guy that owned the company had a Cirrus. And I grew up in Warm Springs, so I was right underneath Mission Peak. And I saw all the stuff going on. Through that, all I saw them was go up and lie down, and that's going to be expensive. Not a lot of fun, because if they took off, you'd never see them, right? All I see is the rides. So he pulls the Cirrus into the shop one day, and I look and I go, that's different. So you never see glass planes either. All you'd see is the 233s and the tow planes. So I got real interested. He goes, well, there's a club out at Hummingbird, NCSA. So I went out there, and probably a year and a half, 2 years later, I had my license. So I did it totally backwards. I started flying his Cirrus after I got my license. And the club had a Atlantic. I trained in the Atlantic. They had a K-8, a lot of hours of K-8, which was a lot of fun. They had a Pilatus before. And I got my license, and I was the only guy in the club. There was 2 of us that were qualified. You had to have a license to fly the B4. A lot of hours in the B4.
Did you fly acro in it too?
Not much, a little bit, but we were talking earlier. We used to dogfight up on the Altamont before they had the windmills. And we had to wait for Harry Kroll to go home, and then we'd fly over the airport. Is Harry gone? Yeah, he's gone. Okay, so for the next 2 hours it was on. But Hummingbird was a great place to fly. I knew Ted Nelson, Harry Kroll, Les Arnold, so I was really fortunate in that. I came in at a time when those people were still active and
They were still alive.
yeah. So
Okay, we're just doing a quick introduction. So what kind of planes did you fly?
Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to go back to you a second. Before Hummingbird Haven started, there was a field of Warm Springs Boulevard near Warm Springs.
was it Centerville?
No, Warm Springs.
Oh wow, okay.
I'll get to the Centerville one in a second.
Wow, okay.
Okay, so anyway, can you get me back on?
Hit a space bar or something.
No, I'll use this. Okay. This is what I started in TG3. Oh, he's not here tonight. And I graduated after about 2 months of flying that. I went over to the 126. So you all know what a TG3 looks like, I think. This is I think it's either an A or a B model. I can't remember. That was a lot of fun. I like flying that thing. And I have about 90 flights on all of the planes I flew. Okay, next one. This is a weird 222, I think. It might be a 219 or something. I don't recognize that nose. Looks weird. But I have another shot of a 222. I got some time in that too. I used to take my friends up for rides in these things. I get time that way. Next.
Are they still your friends?
Yeah. Whoops, jumped one. Anyway, I ended up.
That's the next one in line.
Okay, this is the Hall Cherokee. Stan Hall was a personal friend of mine. He passed away a few years ago. I still have his parachute. And this thing is a great big model airplane. built like a model. And the nice thing about this is that supposedly, well, this is not standard, because the standard is turtleback goes with to here. And then he had a built-in canopy. And it looks like he's got a rounded nose. The thing I did not like, the couple features, Stan asked me to go fly his plane one time. And couple things I didn't like about it. One, the spoilers were a little too small, and I had a hard time on handle pulling the spoilers open. The thing kind of weathercock because it had that sharp pointed nose, and that made it kind of a little difficult. But it was an honest sailplane. The 126 was just too easy to fly. I mean, you could say, I want to go right, and it went right. You didn't have to do a damn thing. This thing you had to fly, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, next one. That's the Hummingbird. I got a chance to go up with Jerry Nelson one time. Right back in here, the plant that opens up, and your motor pops up, and it's the Nelson. This is Harry Pearl's design. He designed the plane, and Ted Nelson provided all the rest of it, the equipment, the engine, and all the mechanisms. Now, how did Ted Nelson make his money? He made those engines for KDs, which are drones, target drones. When I was in the Navy, I used to fire at those darn things with a 3-inch 50 caliber anti-aircraft batteries. I mean, they'd go find, we could never hit those things. They're unbelievable. And these are VT fuses, and we still couldn't hit them. They're so fast. But anyway, I went up with Jerry on that one, and that was a lot of fun. You made a comment earlier, 232 and the Hummingbird, roughly. Yeah, characteristics. I had been flying a TG3 and a 126 and the Cherokee. When I went up in that thing, I said, wow, this is incredible. What a beautiful, I mean, you know, it's just like a glass slipper. It's unbelievable. Next one. Okay.
Well, okay, let's hold there.
I'll stop.
Yeah. So those are the planes you flew, and so maybe this is a good lead-in slide. Where are you flying? So just actually say the city, because we don't know the names of the fields.
I'm going to show you. Right up here in the corner is where Hummingbird Haven is.
Okay, so beyond Livermore. Right.
Yeah, just past east of Livermore.
Okay.
Now, comes the interesting part. Les Arnold was running a commercial operation, i.e. he had some students. Ted Nelson told him to get off the field. You can't operate here because it's an operation. So he had to move his operation from there. Where was he going to go? A little place down here in Fremont. See this quarry area? Right down in here somewhere was a field called Centerville Airport. So I got to fly the sailplanes on air tow from there down to there, both the 126 and the TG3.
So those were your two main fields. From there, moving
From there down to Centerville. That was before sky sailing. Okay, and I think he operated out of Centerville for, I don't know, 5-6 months or whatever it took before sky sailing came in operation. The interesting thing is we're going through Sonoma Pass, and I'm following Les, and look ahead, there's two big black dots on the horizon. I mean, right directly in front of us at our altitude. So, whoa, over we go. Two F-8Us that were flying out of Moffett Field went right through Sonoma Pass, climbing out. So that was scary, but it was really fun. Anyway, I got to fly those, and he's told me on the second flight. Then he let me fly the Super Cub back to pick up the second one. He said, go try the ridge. That's the first time I'd ever flown that ridge, and I flew that.
So where did they fly? Where did you guys fly around Bay Area?
I didn't fly in the Bay Area.
Oh.
I did all my flying up in Minden, or all my training in Minden, and I've flown.
Minden, which is
It's one valley east of Lake Tahoe.
Down around this area
Carson
here
City.
is Sky Sailing.
okay.
Sky Sailing was five guys got together and built this big facility. They had this they had stock races, stock car races. They had whatever.
Drag
They
racing.
had drag racing, and they had a little pond for sailboats and stuff like that. But the main thing was with Sky Sailing, the glider port. Okay, and a lot of people went through that.
And how about you, Rich? Where did you fly?
So like I said, started in Hummingbird. I had some flights out of sky sailing. Truckee, air sailing, which is out of Sparks. Hummingbird moved their operation out to Byron. So if anybody's interested, they're still, the Ames Club is still out there, and it's the best deal for instruction you're gonna find
And where's that again?
at
I got a
Byron
picture
Airport.
of it.
At Byron.
Where's
I got a
County?
picture of it, I'll show you.
It's north of Tracy, near.
So it's only probably
East of the,
half an hour from
you know where
Hummingbird.
Bosco Road is? Out of Livermore?
Okay.
You take Bosco Road. and-
Okay.
So they're still nonprofit. Best deal around.
The Ames Club was started, I believe, from guys from Ames Research Center, which I'm along.
Okay, so how did you learn? Like formally, how did you learn? Did you take lessons?
Yeah, it was Ames Club that's all they do is give instruction. They're just for new pilots. So it's a equity system. You go in and you pay whatever the current equity is in all the planes. There's no hourly charges for the planes. You just sign up for hour blocks. The instruction was reasonable. So when I started, it was $8 for a tow, for 3,000 foot tow.
It's a buck and a half.
Yeah, instruction was $10 an hour. So I don't know where it is
And
now.
how many hours did you need?
I think I want to say 160 hours.
So it's a decent amount of hours.
Oh, yeah. I think it was, 15 hours or so, something like that.
Is that the same for you? Or just like
Yeah, I forgot what I did to get to solo. I think I did something like, I think it was so much dual and I think 10 hours of solo flight before I got my.
And then did you do a lot more after that? Oh, you
Yeah.
got the block time, right?
Yeah.
How many hours did you buy for that?
I ended up buying 4 different blocks, so I flew somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 hours altogether.
Okay. But
And
so,
that was a short
so solo-
gliding career.
but you can get a solo pretty quick, but you need to go for a lot more to
Yeah, just, once you get the solo, then you're out on your own learning how to
You're
do
just
stuff.
crash proof at that point. You're not soaring that. And a lot of the instructors I've run into are not soaring pilots. They're really not. They're
crash proofing.
yeah, that's about what they do. So
How did you learn, Walt?
I soloed in 8 hours, less than 8 hours.
And then
I did, but I did an awful lot of 10 and 20 and 15-minute flights. Boy, I got a lot of aero tow, and Les was very, well, like I said, he had 3 students, so he beat the hell out of us too. And I got my ticket in about, I have it written down somewhere, about 3 months after I started, 4 months after I started, I had my ticket.
So tell us the good things about soaring. Like what did you love about it? Maybe we start with you, Rich.
Everything. I mean, it's addictive. I've had 2 different soaring careers. The one I've already talked about, then about 10 years ago, I got back into the sport, and I discovered through a coworker that the operation from Vacaville, probably a lot of people have seen that, we moved up to Williams, which is 45 minutes north of Sacramento.
Lagoon Valley?
Yeah, Lagoon Valley, Rex moved it up to Williams.
Right.
He drew up a 50-mile radius and said it has to be
Right.
within 50
Right.
miles, and it's like 49 miles away.
Right. There was one at Dixon. I've got it on that list there. There was one at, here's where, well, keep
Well,
going.
I'm still back into what's the good, what are the great things about it?
So I did a lot of soaring at Hummingbird, but a lot of it was ridge, and I still love ridge to this day. It's my favorite kind of flying as far as soaring. But when I went up to Williams, everything had changed, GPS, and I did a lot of cross country there. Flying the Mendocinos is totally different than the Sierras. There's no air traffic for one thing, that's why I love it. It's like, and I'm sure you can, did you do the 3 approaches? I mean, you have to talk to ATC depending on where you are. And now it's a zoo. You have to have a transponder. So the Sierras are interesting, but just flying the Mendocinos, learning to fly convergences, in a year and a half, I put 1,100 hours on the clock. So I flew nationals, I flew regionals.
So just loved it, just went.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
And how about you, Eric? What did you like about it? What was-
When I was a little kid, we visited some museum in the East. It was 1960, and I can still see in my mind this beautiful, shiny wooden glider up there. Thinking back now, I think it was probably a Bolus Albatross. And then hanging there, I can still see it. I said, man, I want to do that someday. So it took me forever to get going on it, but I love, basically I'm not much of a motorhead, but so I love sailing and I love skateboarding and just flying gliders, whatever. And I love flying the models too.
And how about you, Walt? What about gliding that you liked, you loved?
Well, full deployment was my item on my bucket list to do from a kid. And living that close to Elmira and reading old, any of you guys remember Air Trails magazine, which is now Model Aviation? It was bought by AMA and became Model Aviation, but it was the big magazine. And there was always an article on Soaring about Soaring from Alex Davidoff, and I read that stuff religiously. And like I say, there was a hill not far from my house, and I could toss my planes out of there. I was into free flight as well, so I loved that. But
Okay. So what are the downsides of gliding? Like, I take it you're not gliding as much as you used to, so touch on the downsides.
Time commitment, listen, I went down 80% time at work when I was flying competition. I was able to do it, but that's just how much time it takes. If you're gonna, spend that much time in the air, flying at Williams was 2.5 hours each way driving, and then so it's this huge time commitment. And then complacent, and I got hurt. I totaled the plane and got hurt. And wife said, "Well, I have a vote now because I have to take care of you while you're healing up." So I vote no, and I'm still involved up there. But as I talked to you, I got back into RC stuff, and I don't miss the sailplanes as much as I thought I would. It's just you're still flying. It's a different viewpoint. When I'm flying in a sailplane, I can't see what it's doing. I mean, I can feel what it's doing. I get to look out. But when I'm flying, RC, my inputs, I get to see what they're. So it's a different thing, but it's just as satisfying.
How about you, Eric? What was the
The
downside?
main downside is the expense. Where I flew was up in Minden, which is 230 miles away. So
it's cheaper. Yeah.
But it was cheap because I bought the block time. My brother lives in South Tahoe, so I could stay there without renting a motel or hotel. So that was very helpful. But my parents were wearing out, and I moved home to take care of them.
So it's
And
kind of
pretty much
time.
quit flying.
Yeah. And how about you, Walt?
I had
How's your plane
different-
still in the hangar?
It's my airplane is still sitting, it's about 70% complete. And I just, too many other things going on. But here's my downfall on Soaring. I loved it, and it was a lot cheaper than what you guys went through. I think I probably spent about $400 to get my ticket plus.
But real dollars.
But my last flight was out of Sky Sailing. Remember, I had helped put that thing in business. And I was in line to land, and there was a guy in front of me. He was on base, turning into final, and he starts thermaling. It's about 50 feet off the ground, and he's thermaling. There was a pond at the end of the field there, at the east end of the runway. And he's thermaling over a pond. You're not going to do anything there. And I said, I'm going to give this guy about 2 more seconds, and if he doesn't go in, I'm going to cut him off. And I did. He was still sitting out there. I wasn't sure he was going to make it back to the field. He was so low. I peeled off, and I went long on the field. I slipped in, landed the 26, no problems, and got chewed out by Les Arnold. I said, I don't like the way you run your operation. You taught me how to do this, and I'm had it right up here. I got a new wife, kid on the way. I'm not screwing around with this. And that's where I got disenchanted with the whole, because I felt that there were too many yo-yos learning how to fly sailplanes, and they were not following the rules. I had a guy behind me waiting to get in too, so I said, I better go in. And so I got chewed out. Why didn't you go to the landing, to the drag strip? I said, why didn't he go in and land like he was supposed to?
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't fly for 49 years after that. You guys, I told you the story about it. My last trip down Hollister, I had a ball, and it all came back.
So did you solo, or you had a pilot with you, or?
Yeah, I went up with Brent Heisey. You guys remember him? Well, his father gave a lecture here one night.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, I went up with him, and he was telling me, now, why are you doing that? Because I make a turn, I tend to drop my nose just a little bit to keep airspeed up. That's the way I was taught.
Yeah.
He said, why are you doing that? You don't have to do that. I said, why not? I'm keeping my airspeed up. My yaw string is right where it's supposed to be. I got my airspeed up. I feel comfortable. I'm not going to change. Then the same thing, like releasing from the toe. put a little catenary in there, then release. Not this boink. This is what I think is, so there are a lot of people, I mean, my lessons from Les have stayed all these many years.
Yeah. Real safety conscious.
And and now your cost is gonna come up. My kids and my wife paid for my ticket. We went up to 8,240 feet, which was 8,000 feet above the field officer. I stayed up 55 minutes on a 232, and I hadn't had such a ball in all my life. And I said, but point you brought up, now you gotta have a transponder, you gotta have all this other stuff at a controlled, semi-controlled field. It's, Unicom,
It's an
whatever.
expense.
It's a big expense. Am I willing to pay another $1,000 or so to get, all I have to do, I've got a license, I've got a certificate, that's what it is now, it's not a license anymore, it's called a certificate. It's gonna cost me probably a total of $1,000 to get back where I can join BASA, B-A-S-A,
Yeah.
and be able to fly their ships. Do I wanna do that?
Yeah.
I'm 83 years old, do I need to do that? I don't think so.
Okay, so do you have predictions about the gliding as a sport? I mean, is it growing, is it shrinking, is it too dangerous for hobbyists, or safer than it used to be, or any thoughts on
I
that?
don't think it's safer. I know personally, probably between 6 and 10 guys over the years that have died flying sailplanes. Personally know them. I don't know 6 or 10 guys that have died driving cars. And I know a lot more people that drive cars than I do that fly sailplanes. So, they said the safety, the most dangerous thing is going to the airport. It's like, no. I know too many people have died flying sailplanes, so it's not the safest
It's
thing in
not
the
a
world.
hobby for the faint of heart.
So, but
You definitely have to pay attention to everything. You can't be complacent, you can't improvise. It's just, you gotta pay attention.
The one
to
thing I got
every
criticized
detail.
about on my last flight is I was spending more time watching my instruments and stuff instead of keeping my eyes out around, and that's something else. But once you get the hang of it, once you get the feel back, see this, to me, it's all in the fingers on the stick. That to me is, I can tell what that plane's doing. Getting to radio control, I don't get that feeling.
Okay,
This is where I
Hold that thought, that's the next question. Just in general, then, so if you had to predict, you'd say the hobby is, the sport is maybe slowing down in the future?
I don't know, there's a lot of fancy hardware and there are a lot of rich people that love to do it.
Yeah, and yeah, people can find a niche for
Yeah.
anything. Right?
So,
Okay, so now, Walt, why don't you go on? So how does it help your model gliding, or is there any relation to model gliding?
I have a real problem with that. I've cracked up a few, like my gentle lady sitting there needs a wing repair. I don't have that same feeling. Now, I know, the one thing I did learn from flying full size is thermal finding. The feel, the one time I flew the Strider over at Curtis, I had that thing up, there was a dot in the sky. And what are you doing? I says, well, I know where to go. You look, that's something I picked up, and I'm sure you guys did too. You have a feeling for it. You don't follow a pigeon or a seagull. Forget it. They're not
flyers.
They're not the indicators you want. You need a nice hawk or a vulture, turkey vulture, whatever.
So just the sense of thermals and
Yes, but
staying on.
as far as equating, going back, I work on my simulator a lot on my computer, and I follow, if I fly standing here and I'm flying the plane up there, I have a hard time landing it or something. But if I go in, sit in a plane through the simulator, no problem. That's me.
Yeah.
You guys are much better. Maybe if I'd never taken full-size flying, maybe RC would have been easier for me, but it's not.
Because it's a whole, like you said, Rich, right? You're sitting in a different spot, whole different view.
Is it harder to fly RC or full scale?
it's much harder to fly RC. It's
Oh,
way harder.
That's interesting, because having first-person view is.
Yeah, you can feel it, you lean over, you know what's going on, where you're aiming, up, down. I have to say that it's sort of an acquired feel. I've took maybe 40 or 50, 45 people for rides, and show I went with them. And One guy in particular, I'd say, okay, you're playing, and he instantly pulled the nose up a little bit, and I said, don't do that, it's not gonna last long. So I said, okay, so we pick up speed again. Anyway, every time I turn it over to him, he'd pull back, because he knows nothing about airplanes, or he didn't then. He's since got his license in power planes, but anyway, it's a different kind of thing, and there's a lot going on, a lot to pay attention to.
I suppose you didn't have your stick on a transmitter on your RC plane, then it probably wouldn't last too long to get
You know what, I can tell people that want to try RC flying that it's possible to learn by yourself, and you might do it without crashing, but it's really
Did any of you
unlikely.
fly RC before you flew full scale?
I did. I didn't. My instructor he'd said he was gonna get a big stick to hit because I was snoozing on the rudder. And with a Grove 103, if you don't fly with a rudder, you're gonna be wallowing everywhere. It's just amazing. So anyway, I flew mainly slope planes for all my RC
No
flying,
rudder.
and you know, I don't have a rudder, so I was telling somebody on the phone, I was telling Kyle,
Yeah.
I bought my simulator to teach my left thumb how to deal with a rudder on the sailplane. So it's not perfect because my left thumb is still working when I don't have a rudder on the plane, but it's still there when I need it.
What I had learned is you do your turns, you use your ailerons first, and then you use your rudder to maintain a good flip, nice turn. That's the way I learned it, and it seems to work for me. But how do you do that in an RC plane? You're not there to see it.
I'm left thumb down. I'm just stupid with my left. It's just
Even though
computer
I think most of us are.
Yeah, it's like I'm done.
Well, that's where you do the mixing, you
Yeah.
couple the rudder in with your aileron.
But that's not.
It's not pure.
That's not instinctual to a person if you were full-size
No,
pilot.
but it
You don't have-
compensates for
you're
us that don't
automatically
know
doing that. There's a little bit of seat of the pants when you're flying. The seat of the pants, you feel it. You feel when you're not, if you're crabbing through a turn or whatever. Whereas you don't know what you're doing in an RC. I mean, you can see it, yeah, maybe. It's very subtle.
Quite interesting. I took my one and only flight down at Hollister when they had an air show down there one year. And so when we went up, the guy let us fly. And
I have a picture of that plane in there.
and so I was doing my turns, but I wasn't thinking rudder at all because it's all coupled in our seat. And I was just doing aileron turns. And he says, you know, you do have a rudder.
The other thing I found that I brought the meeting we had at Campbell Community Center. I was talking to the speaker after, and I said, one thing I noticed about RC guys, you're flying sailplanes, you fly them too slow. You don't know what your polar is. You don't know what your curve is. The good guys know they know what to do. They practice and they get at the peak of where the best L over D at the speed is and all that, and least sink rate and all that. They know that stuff because they practice it at. But I see too many guys watching you guys and you're flying so slow. What you're doing, you're going on the backside of that curve, and you're not getting an efficient flight. So my feeling is, from a full size, fly a little faster. Same thing with landings. When I landed that Cherokee I was telling you about, not Cherokee, the 126, I came in high because I was still in the downwind leg, did a short base and then down final like this. I come in high and fast and then just flare it out and land. I don't use up the whole runway like Air Force guys do. I fly like a Navy pilot.
Another third, man.
Being a Navy guy.
Eric, maybe you could just speak on a few, we have like 4 or 5 pictures from you. Would you just kind of give us a little explanation of?
Well, it's a Grove 103, 2-seat, 4 and aft. It's got the controls in the front. The rudder is the adjustable position on this sort of rail, and the front rudders, which I did all my training in the front until the day I got my license, and I took my instructor and he sat in the front. The rudder pedals in the back are beautifully well attached. To adjust them, you move them on the hardware that stays attached to the cables or push rods or whatever's in there. Anyway, the rudder in the front is kind of spongy, but the rudder in the back, you're sitting wide. The seat's right in front of you, the front seat. I don't know, they're kind of crude. They're not a lot going on in there. You have a variometer, airspeed, and a radio. I don't know, they didn't have, I guess you got a magnetic compass also.
Is this a club plane?
Soaring is a commercial operation, so it was not a club
You
plane.
rent it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll the next.
She was working the line. It's a Piper Pawnee tow plane. I think her, what?
Good show plane.
I heard a guy who flew ag with Pawnees and he flew tows with Pawnees. I talked to him at my neighbor's place years ago. And he said it was a lousy ag plane, but a great tow plane.
They sure got a lot of for ag planes.
Anyway, her boyfriend was another guy. He flew a Spitfire in some canyon up and crashed it. So he killed himself and the plane in a Spitfire.
Oh, how about the next? Who's that guy?
That's before they call them selfies. I was flying a Grove 102.
That early selfie.
Yeah. So that was in a Grove 102. That is one of the least comfortable sailplanes on the planet.
It kept you awake.
Oh, they got a horrible seating arrangement.
Must have been Air
Are
Force.
they hot or cold or noisy or quiet?
You know what? Once you're up off the ground, the heat is not a problem. On the floor of the desert, Minden is 4,700 feet, but it's a desert. So it's dry, it's hot, definitely carry a lot of water with you. But once you're up, the heat isn't a problem.
And how about the noise? Is it pretty blowy up there? Noise?
It's like listening to a fan, sort of a nearby fan.
Yeah,
Depends on the plane. too.
Yeah, okay. it
Some of them
does.
are better sealed than others.
That's your airspeed indicator.
Yeah, it
That's
really
how
is.
good pilots know.
You know
how
what's
fast
really
they
weird
fly.
is you guys flown wave?
He knows.
I have flown with.
So when you know you're in wave when all the noise goes away.
Goes away, right?
It is just amazing. It just, compared to a thermal day, you'll transition in the wave and all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah, it's just quiet. And I don't know whether it's just a laminar flow or what it is, but it gets really quiet.
Did you guys ever fly with ballast and have a chance to use it?
Yeah, I did. It was interesting.
Never used ballast.
I didn't like the climb. I never, what I did well in contests was climb. I could climb most anybody, but it just really bugged me. But it was, I only have a few hours. That was much, that mass makes a big difference in comfort when you're cruising, especially on a rough day. But it just wasn't worth the sacrifice and climb for me.
Did you use a cannula at all?
Yeah.
You guys are using a bunch of terms. So what's a mask? What's a...
So the cannula is what you see nowadays. I mean, you guys have seen the demand systems now. They're using. You see somebody in a bottle, and you see just a little.
Oh,
It's
so
a small lecture bottle.
Oxygen.
It's oxygen.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
Yeah,
you
it's
go
called
so
mountain
high,
high.
it gets too
You
thin.
just dial in the altitude,
Okay.
and it knows you want to go on at 10, and it gives you the short burst right on the. It senses when you're breathing in and when you breathe in the cannula, you'll hear it go. And bottle of oxygen will last me all weekend, which it used to last a day. So that's gotten a lot
Okay.
better.
Didn't know.
But yeah, you spend
What altitude do you need to worry about that?
12.5 in excess of 30 minutes,
15.
15, 14.5 all the time, and I was always on a 10.
Yeah.
Just because oxygen's cheap insurance, and I just always feel better.
Yeah. So how about next slide? Oh, and Eric, maybe you can talk on the, not that picture reminded me of it, but maybe this one, air sickness. One time I was a passenger.
I have not ever experienced air sickness. I'm lucky, but in the 45 or so people I gave rides, maybe 3 of them didn't feel some degree of queasiness, and only a couple of them actually filled the little
So
barf.
42 got air sick is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt queasy when I flew with him because it was a rough day and we kept banking all the time. And if you're sitting in the front, you're away from the CG, so you're actually, the pilot is very close to the CG. And he was smart. He says, like, fly the airplane for a while. I mean, you start flying it, and then
You get control.
and then you get control, and your mind settles down. But Yeah, because you're never flying straight. You're constantly banking. You're constantly pitching.
If you're thermal, you certainly are.
You know,
Now, I had a passenger one time, one of my best friends, in fact, he was the best man at my wedding. I took him up in a sailplane, 222. We were down at Sky Sailing and we were thermaling. And he was sitting in front and I was flying from, I was in the back. And I was letting him, he was going to be a pilot. He wanted to be a private pilot. So I said, here, take the control. I had given him some pre-instructions and stuff. And I noticed things were not going right when his ears turned white. And the back of his head turned white. I says, how you doing? He says, I think we better go down. We went down.
All right, so any comments on this? I guess that's a yaw string.
There's the yaw string. This arc here is a reflection off the canopy of the vent. So right in front of the plane where the tow hook goes, it's about a hole that's maybe 2.5 inches in diameter. The wind comes in there and comes out the vent. So the ventilation in those things is really good. I don't know, see Lake Tahoe is 6,400 feet. Heavenly Valley is like 10,020. This peak over here is just about 20 feet shy of 10,000. So I'm probably at about 10,000 feet. Can you see an altimeter here? So I'm, looks like 11.5 or so, yeah.
Well, Carson Pass is 11,000 feet.
Carson Pass is out of the view over here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So you spent a lot of time between 15 and 18, right?
I did most of my flying around 10 to 12.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever take any chamber? Did you go up
I
to
did
the
not.
chamber?
A lot of people I knew did, and I never had a
I wish I
chance
had, because if I had, I would have had a chance to go up in an F-14.
to. No, it's-
Chief
it's-
test pilot Grumman was at Point Magoo, and I was on active duty then, and I was talking to him, and he says, "You been in the chamber?" I said, "No." He said, "Damn," he said, "I'd take you up to this." So he let me sit in there, cycle the wings and stuff. Man, it's my favorite.
Okay, how about the next slide?
I gave a friend of mine, actually I gave a bunch of people rides, as I've said. She's in the front seat. I was showing her what to use and what not to touch. There's a little knob in the front. When you're on tow, don't touch the knob. There's really not a whole lot to these planes. They got the 3 main controls. You got the aileron, elevator, and you have the rudder pedals for the feet. And you have a spoiler. Does that look like a spoiler handle there? I think it is.
Could be. Hey,
I
Eric.
can't remember. I think
So,
Gears
if you were to fly this plane solo, being a 2-seater, you'd have to fly in the front
Yes.
because of the tow release.
No, the tow release is in both
CG.
cockpits.
Oh,
But-
really?
But the CG, the back seat CG is about maybe 8 or 9 inches.
Too far
from the-
aft.
Well, no, the seat is about 8 or 9 inches from the CG in the back seat. So you have to sit in the front or put a lot of weight up there if you want to fly.
That's the other thing. A lot of times they'll add a little bit of weight to balance it out, especially if you're taking a small passenger.
Yeah.
They'll you
Yeah, they have these
sit with this
iron
bag of
weights.
sand or something.
Yeah, the Grove is set up with these sort of half or quarter turn thick iron things that you can put in. I guess they were about 10 pounds each or so. So if you took a lightweight passenger, you put a little weight in there to keep the CG in the right
I
range.
have a story to tell about slope soaring and passengers. A friend of mine was down at the Naval Postgraduate School, and he had washed out of Navy flight training because of depth perception. He had an eye problem. So he was up here. I took him for a ride in the 222 off of Mission Peak. And we're flying right along and just having a great time and going back and forth, Finally, he says, we land, he says, "Do you guys always fly so close to those cliffs?" I said, "Yeah, that's where the lift is." Scared the hell out of him, because like I said, he had a depth perception problem, and it just scared him that wingtip was going right, rushing along the slope.
Yeah, I think we're near the end of these slides. That's the
I
same.
think a
plane.
buddy of mine took, yeah, I'm in the back seat there.
That beautiful scenery. That looks like a switch over or something.
Yeah, this is Friel Peak over there, and Heavenly Valley is up there. You can hardly see it sort of around the corner. one of the things they used to do, talking about rides, the sailplane proprietor liked it when, on a calm day in the wintertime, which is basically very calm unless it's the storm, they'd give you a tow, and they would ask you to hang on for a good couple of turns around the top of Heavenly Valley, because there's some skiers that go, I want to do that. So anyway, I'd hang on and then pop off till about 700 or 800 feet above the top of the hill and just blast down like maybe 150 feet off the top of the trees. Just going down, and the skiers would all be going, oh, look at that, as you go by.
I was probably one of those guys.
And when you get down to the bottom of the ski run, it's an easy shot out to the airport to land.
Okay, thanks. That might be the last one. Yeah, okay.
Hey, I'd like to go,
Oh, wrong picture.
like to go back to 11 and 12 of mine,
Okay.
And then let's, be finishing up.
and then that should do it.
Wow. So, 11 and 12.
Okay. You all know where Calistoga is?
Yeah.
You go up to Palisades, and you go on this road to Middletown. So over here, it's a Crazy Creek glider port. That's still active.
Now, is that Calistoga?
No, Calistoga is down here in the
Oh,
valley.
okay.
You can see
Farther
that, you take
north.
the road out, no, east. You
Oh.
take the Palisades, you know, you go up the Palisades east of town.
Okay.
If you go north, you go, I guess, to Ukiah or Healdsburg or someplace. But anyway, this route, and anyway, that's an active, that is, one of the questions he has is what is still in operation? Well, we know about Hollister. This guy is still functioning. They did have a problem there one time. I read his accident report where the tow plane and the glider pilot collided. I don't know how the hell they did that.
What, oh, the tow plane?
The tow plane and the glider
Yeah, it was a
pilot.
friend of mine. So, yeah, they went head on base.
Wow.
So-
Anyway, that's Crazy
Oh, yeah,
Creek.
both of them did.
And Middletown's here, if you go that way, I guess you go to Lakeport or Clear Lake. Let's go to the next one, Bob. You guys are talking about Byron. Okay, Vasco Road out here, there's the field. This is Byron Highway over here, Livermore's down here. And that's where they,
And that's glider foot too? or-
that's a glider, well, it's both,
County.
that's also parachuters, right?
That's also everything.
That's
Yeah,
everything.
Jumpers and it's crazy. I won't lie there.
But again, the one thing about any of these airports, it's not like at Hummingbird Haven where you didn't have a radio, or Sky Sailing, you didn't worry about, radios or anything, or transponders or any of that stuff. All of a sudden, that's what my problem would be. And I told them down there at Hollister, I said, one of the things I'd have to have about a half a day just, and I used to be an air intercept controller in the Navy, flying, working with F4s and stuff like that. So I'd have to go back and revisit all that and get all the terminology again.
Okay.
So that's something you add to the.
Hey, Walt, is that an old military base?
I
Byron?
don't think so. I don't know.
Actually, it was just a single, I don't even think they had a crosswind runway, 20 years ago. And then the county got a bunch of federal money to because there's a ton of people out there
Yeah.
shooting touch and goes. It's a great training place because all gives them Livermore because Livermore's too busy.
The
So-
town of Byron is up there, but it's, Mount Diablo is right over here. So it's east of Mount Diablo. Now that'd be nice to wave.
No, there's a guy that tows from there to Del Val.
Brushy Peak and.
He tows to Del Val.
Oh,
He
really?
gets up in Tiger Country and he's almost made it to Mexico.
Okay, so any last minute comments or questions for our panel? All right, well, let's get
Wait, Bruce.
I'm just kind of curious if any of you guys had gone from like a 126 to a glass slipper or kind of compare.
He probably has.
I went backwards. I started out in a Cirrus. That was my first, and then I bought a 126 because it was mine
Mhm.
and not my boss's. That if I messed up, I'd probably get fired because he was a little bit volatile. And in my second career, I bought a LaBelle, and I actually fit in a LaBelle. People thought I was crazy. But I love LaBelles, they
Can
fly
you find
great.
me the Pratt Reed one then?
Uh,
I want to,
And I still own my 126.
The Pratt Reed.
But yeah, I went back and forth, and it really, I love the 126 too. It's got a sport canopy, which is an open cockpit, which is a lot of fun to fly.
Is there a big performance difference between like the LaBelle and the?
The LaBelle, no, you know what, it just depends. At 100 knots, yeah. At 50, 60 knots, when you're just a sport pilot,
Yeah,
I can out-climb anybody. Being in the LaBelle is really light wing loading and a very good climber. But, we start going 60, 70 knots, there's no comparison.
This is Pratt Reed. The reason I showed this is I did get a chance to fly in one of these. When I was working on my Cherokee up in San Bruno, where two other guys and I were sharing a house. They were building boats. I was building my Cherokee in a garage. The landlord was a United Airlines pilot. And he called me one day and he says, hey, I got a couple of guys been asking about sailplanes. Can they come over and talk to you about it? I said, yeah, come on over. So a bunch of them came over. Next thing I know, we spent probably till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning talking airplanes. These are all United captains. And they ended up buying a Pratt Reed. And that is the most fabulous plane to fly in. It's a terrible plane to put together. It weighs a ton. It's U.S. Navy, you can see that. But you got like a fishbowl right in front of you when you're flying. And one of the guys, Bert Berger, who's United, he and I, we went up flying out of Sky Sailing one time. And man, what a pleasant flight that was. It was no burner, but it was sure nice to fly in because you could see everything. So this encompasses, they got more flying fun flying that thing than they did flying DC-8s and 10s and stuff.
Okay. The seats aren't side by side in that, right?
Huh?
Seats aren't side by side.
Yes, they are. Seats are side by side.
Oh, how about that?
All right, let's thank you.